Okay, this video is going to show you how we're going to model the sprinkler head as it rotates, as if water was shooting out and it's spinning. We're going to use Geogebra and animations to do that. The math question that I posed to you in the video is, what if these arms aren't centered like in this picture here? What if the pivot point that swings this arm around isn't at dead center? What if it's off to a side? What would that look like? How would it spin? So your assignment is going to be ultimately how you're going to be making a animation modeling the sprinkler head as if it was not centered. So to be able to do that, we need to first of all wrap our head around how we can model this as if it was centered, just like in the picture. So I'm going to show you how we do that. Okay, so what we have to think about is, if we're going to use rotations as our thought, then how can we use that? How can we model with rotations? But we got to think about properties, right? So what we always need to start with is, if this is a rotation, like if this arm here just rotates to map onto this arm, right? So if we rotated this 180 degrees, this point would rotate to this point, right? This bend in the arm, if it rotated 180 degrees, it would rotate, say, to this point. So what we can think about is, we have some points that are rotations of each other, so we'll just set up some pairs here so that we can actually find the center of rotation, right, using our geometry. Okay, so I'm going to grab my point tool and I'm going to just make some points here. I'm going to make them stand out a little bit in my picture, so I'm going to use maybe this light blue. That always works well. And then I'm also going to make my points a little bigger so that I can see them really good. Okay, that seems good enough. So now I'm going to put some points on the end of the sprinkler heads here. So like right here, I'm going to put a point, and right here at the end of this sprinkler head, I'm going to put a point. So we can actually think of this as C rotating to D. So D could be the rotation point of C if it got rotated around our center, somewhere around here, some angle. Looks like 180 degrees. Okay. Also, let's set some points up for the bend here so that we can model that point. Okay, so I'm going to change the color because these are going to be a different pair of rotated points. So I'm going to use maybe a green. Oops. Put my D back to blue. If your points change like that, just go back to the color you wanted and then place your next point, like this one here. I'm going to put a point on the bend. I don't want it blue, but that's okay, because now that I have the point, I can go ahead and make it green. And now my next point will be green as well, which will be this point here. Okay, so we have the points that are at the end of the sprinkler head, and we have the points that are at the bend. So now that we have two pairs of pre-image and image points, can't we find the center of rotation? Even though I know it's got to be somewhere around here. Like, I could probably put a point there and be pretty accurate, but I want to know for sure. And that's why we need to appreciate our geometry properties. To find the center here, don't we just make a segment connecting our pre-image and image points? So there'll be two segments here. I'm going to grab my segment tool. I'm going to make one green and make it pretty thick here so it stands out a little bit. Not too thick, but I'm going to make my segment connecting my two green points that are my rotated points, right? And then I'm going to make a blue segment. So make my segment first, and then I'm going to make it blue to be the segment connecting those 2 points. Okay, so our center, even though we want to put a point, I kind of want to put a point right where these two lines cross. I'm going to click on this little checkbox to the right here, show sprinkler, so I'm going to hide it. So there's our segments there, kind of representing what's going on in our picture, right? But if I hide it, I kind of want to put a point there, but I don't think that that's the center. That doesn't seem like that would be the midpoint of this segment, this green one here, the middle, because doesn't F and E have to be equidistant from the center point? But the center point, remember how we construct that, is we have to construct the perpendicular bisectors of these two lines, and where those two perpendicular bisectors meet is where our center is going to be. And it could be right here, I don't know. It's just, let's find it for sure. So instead of actually constructing the perpendicular bisector, let's use Geogebra to just construct it for us. This fourth toolbox right here is our construction toolbox. So make sure that you grab your perpendicular bisector tool. And all you have to do is just click on the segment that you want to bisect perpendicularly. So I'm going to click on this blue one. So there's its perpendicular bisector. And then I'm going to click on the green one, and there's its perpendicular bisector as well, and where these two meet, which is pretty close to that intersection point, but I wanted to make sure I got the exact one. Okay, so let's find the actual intersection point. So that is a point, intersection point, right? So therefore, it's in our point toolbox. So I'm just going to click the down arrow, and notice there's an intersect two objects tool. So if I click on that, all I have to do is tell Geogebra what two objects or lines I want to intersect and make a point there. So I'm just going to click on my two perpendicular bisectors, and there's the actual center of rotation. It's off a little bit of what I thought it was, but at least now we know the true center of rotation because we used our geometry to find it. Okay, so now this G here, if I go back to my picture, notice that's right up pretty close to the sprinkler head. Now this sprinkler head is kind of old and it's been tweaked a little bit, so these heads aren't exactly 180 degrees from each other, but this is our center point, so we're going to use that in our model here. I need it to stand out a little bit, so maybe I'll make it red, and I'll make it a little bit bigger. Okay, I don't need these perpendicular bisectors anymore, so I'm going to go over in my algebra window, and I'm going to just deselect them on these green circles here. So if you do that, it'll hide them. So now we have our center, okay, and we have really the arms here mapped out with points, okay? And so what I mean by that is, since I'm going to make a model here and I'm going to see this thing rotate, I want to see my sprinkler arms. Okay, so I'm just going to make some segments to go from the center to the bend to the point on the end of the sprinkler arm there. So I'm going to grab my segment tool, and since we're talking sprinkler head, maybe I'll make it gray. And I'm going to make it stand out a little bit thicker than my other lines, so I'm going to make it pretty thick and go from the center to the bend point to the end of the head, okay, center to bend point, and then bend to the end. There's my sprinkler arms, right? So that looks pretty good. If I go back to my picture, oops, I got a point there I don't need, so I just need to delete that. Okay, so if I go back to my picture, that's actually right on top of our sprinkler head. That's pretty cool. So now, how do we animate this thing so that it'll spin for us? Okay, so here's how we do that. We need to make a slider, and a slider just allows us to change values of a variable. So in the third toolbox here, it's going to be, if you hit the down arrow, you'll see the slider tool, and you may already have it up here. So you're going to click slider, and then click somewhere on the screen you want to place the slider. Okay, so right now I'm going to make an angle because we're going to be rotating this, right? So I'm going to be changing the angle of rotation to rotate this arm around. So I'm going to click on angle. It makes the Greek letter alpha here, looks like an A, but it's not. Okay, it's going to go from 0 degrees to 360. All right, increment's going to go by 1 degree. I'm good with that. I want to click on slider. No, I don't. I'm just going to click apply and call that good. So it's going from 0 degrees to a full circle rotation going by 1 degree. So we click apply. So what a slider does is it pops up here, and now I can slide this little dot around and it changes the value from 0 to 360 of an angle. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to rotate this arm around. All right, so I'm going to just look at what the segments and points here. So I'm going to hide this picture. I don't want this balloon green. I'm done with those. Those segments help me get my center of rotation here. So I'm just going to hide them. I'm going to go over to segment since they are segments. And since I got two green and a blue segment, I'm just going to deselect those. And now they're gone, and we can just see our sprinkler head. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We've got to use our rotation tool. So that's in our transformation toolbox here. So in the drop arrow, grab your rotate object tool. I'm just going to click and drag, and I'm going to highlight everything. So I'm telling Geogebra I'm going to rotate all this stuff here. Okay, so now I'm going to just click on G. That's my center of rotation. So I'm going to tell it to rotate around point G now. So the angle is going to be alpha. Now don't set it to the value that your angle is set at. We're going to actually call it alpha so that when we slide this around, our angle will change just due to whatever alpha is. So I'm going to just delete this 45 degrees that comes up. and I'm going to click on my alpha box here, or my variable box, and I'm going to click on alpha. And now I want this thing to rotate clockwise, because that's how the physics of the sprinkler head would work, right? If you were to spin this around, it's got to go clockwise. So we're going to click OK. So there's the actual rotated point, rotated whatever alpha is. So now if I click my move tool and I slide the slider around, notice my sprinkler head rotates, whatever alpha is. So let's get rid of this original here. One way we can select a lot of points in Geogebra is we can just hold the control button down on the keyboard and then just click on all the objects that we want to select. So these original points and even the segments, I'm going to hide a center point there, this arm, these points. Okay, once I have everything selected, I'm just going to right click on one of my objects that's selected, and I'm just going to go up and click on show object, and it'll hide it. So now when I gotta hit Control Z or undo. My angle was selected, so I need to hold Control and deselect it, and now I'm gonna hide. Okay. So as I move alpha around, I can just see my sprinkler head, right? So if I put it back on the picture, this is my sprinkler head rotating around the center point. Pretty cool. All right, last thing, let's turn on the animation. So I'm going to get rid of this picture again. To just make this, since alpha here can slide and change value, we can actually just make it kind of animate itself just by right-clicking and go to animation on. And now our sprinkler head is rotating, right? If I put the picture back on, we can see that this would be our sprinkler head as it rotates around. Now that's not how the sprinkler works, right? It doesn't just hit a point and then reverse direction, like you'll see here. Okay, so we need to fix that because I want this to look just like a sprinkler. So I'm going to pause this. Down in the bottom left corner here is a pause button. I'm just going to pause this real quick. I'm going to change a property of the animation. So it's in my slider that I want to change. So whenever you want to do that, you just right click, go to the objects property. Alright, now if you see down here on animation, on the slider tab in animation, we see oscillating. Oscillating means it goes back and forth, and I don't want that. I just want it to continually increase. Go from 0 to 360, back to 0, up to 360, and keep repeating that. Notice too, speed here. If you feel like your sprinkler head's too slow, like I do, I might want to move mine up to 2. I'll double the speed. Okay, so now I'm going to close out my box here, and I'm going to hit my play button. And now my sprinkler head's really rotating, and it's rotating like it should. So there is my model, my animation here of the sprinkler head as if it was centered like a normal tractor sprinkler is. So now your question is, what if the point wasn't centered? Okay, so submit a little video of your sprinkler head rotating to me, please, and then move on to the next quest where you will create an animation where the center is not the center of the arm here. Alright, I hope that made sense. Good luck, guys. Thanks.